The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Invisible Wounds or Wightman. Please be aware that the content of Fireside Chats with Deborah may contain sensitive subjects such as suicide, grief, violence, PTSD, and other mental health conditions. By discussing these subjects, we will decrease stigma, bring awareness, and hope. If you need support, please reach out to trusted contacts, family, friends, call your doctor, or go to the closest emergency department. Call helplines such as Boots on the Ground at 1-833-677-BOOT. We hope this series helps build self-confidence in you. On today's show, Natalie Nowkawalk, Counsellor, helping the helpers. Fireside Chats with Deborah is sponsored by Leslie Motors of Hairston, Walkerton, and Wingham. Visit lesliemotors.com to learn more. And by
human life is made up of experiences of joy or triumph, of sadness or struggle. With half of Canadians experiencing a mental health crisis before the age of 40, hope is needed. Homewood Ravensview offers life-changing treatment programming for anxiety, depression, trauma, and addiction. When expert comprehensive care is paired with compassion, it transforms everything. Experience the power of care with Homewood Ravensview.
Natalie, I'd like to thank you for coming here today, and I invite you to introduce yourself to the audience and maybe let them know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, thank you. I feel so honored that you've invited me here to speak today. I guess what I'd say about myself is I'm a social worker in private practice now. I've been a social worker for about 28 years now. In private practice for about 13 years. So I do mostly individual adults right now counseling, but I have done work with children, with couples, with families. I've done a whole range of types of work from crises intervention to setting up grassroots organizations throughout my career, and really love the counseling part the best. So that's what I'm currently doing. And grateful to know you, Deb, and know you both through networking through different therapists in the area and through the Invisible Wounds, which has been amazing to see the work that you've done for Invisible Wounds. So thank you again for inviting me here.
Well, thank you. And just to let the viewers know that Natalie actually has been involved with Invisible Wounds and supported us from the get-go. She's been a member of the team, helping out selling tickets, I think, at one of the conferences. She's been speakers. She's now financially supporting us by being a community sponsor, and I sincerely appreciate it. And I like the fact that I get very positive feedback from people that you've counseled, and because my passion is with first responders, that there's a lot in that group. So I'm very confident in providing you as a resource to people who are maybe thinking that they'd at least like to talk to you and see whether it's a nice fit. I know that's one of the things that you are conscious about. You want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess I would say thank you for that, Deb. And involvement with first responders, like in terms of the counseling, I'd say like going back earlier in my career, I first began working with first responders more in the level of when I was doing crises intervention work. So I would work directly with police officers or sometimes paramedics, sometimes fire, around different crisis situation if someone was suicidal, or I was involved in things like mediating situations where there might be rifles or somebody in danger, alcohol involved, situations like that were quite stressful and critical. And so that's when I really got to know the work of the first responders, was firsthand, seeing the work, same with doctors, nurses in emergency situations in clinics. So I have a deep appreciation for seeing that side of the work. And then through going through private practice and through meeting more and more people through invisible wounds and through referrals and working with first responders in a counseling, more one-on-one environment, really allows the opportunity to see more of not just their work side. There's an understanding of the work side through both the work that I've done with them, but also through what they share, but also their personal life, them being able to share personal life stories. And that's where I think the realm of individual counseling, or if people do couple counseling, is really beneficial, because if people can connect to counselors who understand the work and the type of work that's done in first responder work, and the stresses as well as the wonderful parts of the work, and the family dynamics or personal life dynamics, it just opens up a whole world of things that can be worked on and talked about. So that's what I really love. I love that there's been the experience of the work side of it done together, but then in the counseling aspect, I can work on as well personal life things that's brought in, if that's something important for people to bring into counseling. So
is it pretty normative for you to say if a first responder seeks you for some help or some, maybe not even being clear, but just know that he or she or they or them are struggling, that you do the crossover, and that would be them that initiate it for family to be involved?
It may. I used to do more family. Right now I'm doing more individual. So right now in my work, if I saw that some couple therapy might be helpful or family therapy might be helpful, I would probably give a referral to look for people in the area who work with first responders and who do couple counseling, or people who work with first responders and do family. I did some of that in the past, and then through COVID time switched more to individual work at that time. But yeah, I would have done that in the past, and now I would do more of the individual piece work with people. Yeah,
I think that's important that people know that,
yeah,
and that it's validated that they as individuals probably have enough stories and enough issues and enough things to talk about. And you also do specific types of therapy.
Yeah.
Maybe at this point in time you could elaborate on that?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because often I'll have people ask, how do I know how to find a counselor, or what type of counseling, especially when it's the start of the journey. Some people come in and have tried various different counseling styles or different types of counseling, so they may be aware, but at the beginning of starting counseling, it can be tricky to navigate that a bit, to find out, what am I looking for? What are my goals? What kind of therapy? What kind of therapist? So yes, I do a range of different types of therapy, from cognitive behavioral, so people will know that as CBT. It's a pretty popular one that people will know about. I do some narrative where people can share the stories of what happens, and it's through asking questions and people sharing that's helpful for some people. And I do EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy, which is becoming more and more well known as therapy that helps address trauma. although it can also help with grief and other issues, not just trauma, but it's most well known to work through trauma memories. So those are some types of therapies that I do. And so when people seek me out, they often will know that. They will know that from advertising or from word of mouth, or a doctor might refer them to say, I think EMDR therapy would be good if someone's coming in to see a doctor for PTSD or trauma or high anxiety. So it might be a doctor or a colleague or someone else who may know about EMDR therapy and happen to know I'm in the area, or other EMDR therapists that they may refer to certain therapists for EMDR or CBT. Or so sometimes the referral source will guide the person to what they think might be helpful for them. That happens sometimes. And other times people will have heard through word of mouth, or maybe research as well what types of therapies are out there. There are two different types of counselors. So I do social work counseling. And I guess I'm mentioning this because sometimes it's helpful for people to know for their insurance. If they have private insurance, it's helpful for people to look into their insurance to look at how much they're covered for in a year and what types of mental health services will cover. So sometimes an insurance company will cover social work, MSW, psychotherapist, which social workers can also use that title, psychologist, psychiatrist, maybe family marriage counseling. So there's different types of counselors that will be covered under different types of therapy for insurance, but also helpful for people to know, to look at what they're going through and what might be the best fit of type of therapist and type of therapy that they offer. Yeah.
So I do have a question, and I've known you for years, and I still have questions about that specific type of therapy that you do, EMDRS, because sometimes it sounds like a bit voodoo-ish. Some people say it's tap therapy, some people they follow the eyes, some people it's squeeze the things. Can you elaborate on it just a little bit and what it actually is doing? Some people say, oh my God, she's going to get into my brain, or he's going to get into my brain, and what's going to happen?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and definitely people will ask similar type questions when it's actually it's probably one of the most research scientific based therapies out there. There's a ton of research you can find on the internet through EMDR, which is the international website for EMDR therapy. It's a type of psychotherapy. So psychotherapy is any type of talk therapy that will help. So it's a type of talk therapy still, where there's phases to work through with a person, 8 phases to go through. So there's a history taking where we do history taking, finding out some of the background or what some of the main issues are that they're going through. There's a preparation phase where we do some resourcing or strategies and working on things like grounding or preparing a person to be able to work on trauma memories if that's what they're coming in for. And then phases 3 and onward are about reprocessing memories, any unresolved memories and any trauma memories. So the whole idea with EMDR therapy is that we have a natural system in our brain to process things, that we're designed that way. Just like our body's designed to heal, our brain is designed to heal. But when we go through certain traumatic events or certain events in life that aren't resolved, some of those memories can stay stuck in the brain. And some of those memories can be very difficult for people to resolve on their own because they block the brain's natural ability to process those memories with certain types of memories. So those memories stay stuck, and that's why certain people will have flashback memories, for example, or they'll just relive through nightmares, or maybe following an event have a lot of symptoms of PTSD, such as jumpiness, nightmares, flashback memories in their mind, or sometimes those memories can lie dormant and pop up later on in life. I have sometimes people who will come into therapy to say, I feel like I blocked that memory for many years, but now it's really activated. People call it triggered, or it's just like a flood of emotions can come up, and a flood of negative belief about themselves, or all the body sensations from the time of that event can come back. So that's why those type of trauma memories are important at some point to be able to resolve, especially if they're affecting people in their life now. And so EMDR looks at okay, what are the memories of the past that might be stuck in there or still unresolved that are affecting you still today, that might be causing anxiety or stress or depression or relationship issues, and we kind of map them out, do the history taking, the preparation, and then when it comes time to, if it's a right fit of therapy for a person, to start working on the memories one by one, then we use the bilateral. There's a protocol for it, but we ask questions around setting up the memory, and then it's the eye movement or tapping. Sometimes people will do tapping, or there's pulsers that pulsate left to right. It can be binaural beats, so side to side. So it's the left to right stimulation of the body that helps unblock the brain's natural processing. So it takes the memory, it unblocks whatever was blocked in there from the trauma, it unblocks that, so the person's able to reprocess that memory by re-engaging with their natural processing system in their brain. It's like it reconnects, and so the answers come from within the person. It's different than types of talk therapy where you're offering suggestions or strategies. When a person's reprocessing a memory, the answers come from them. Their brain's able to know what to let go of, and their brain's able to connect to their own adaptive or their own strategies or way of resolving that memory within themselves. So it's quite a beautiful type of therapy to bear witness to as a therapist. Not everybody may want to do reprocessing memories. So sometimes I work with people just doing the preparation phase, and we might not do memory processing. But when I do that with people and they're ready, it's been very effective and very helpful for people to work through, and in terms of first responders, to work through reprocessing past work traumas as well as past early life traumas if they're there.
So Natalie, I'm wondering what would happen, in fact, if you had a client that maybe one wasn't a good fit, you know, how you would maybe tell that client that, but also what is it that you do when you have clients that are obviously asking you and seeking help from you, and maybe you need some support or some answers to assist that person?
Yeah, those are both good questions.
Okay.
I think to answer your first question, so one thing that I do personally, being in private practice, is when somebody reaches out to me, I will ask a few questions, and then I offer a 15-20 minute free consultation to allow time. And I do this usually by video, but if they're unable to access internet for video, we'll do by phone. We could do in person. That gets a little trickier for some people to just do 15-20 minutes. But in that period of time, they can ask me questions about my service, and I can also ask them questions about what are some of the main issues that you're looking for support for. And then that way I can be upfront with people to let them know I want to ensure I'm a best fit of service, and that I'm able to work within my scope of practice. That yes, I have 28 years of experience and I consider myself quite a seasoned therapist, but I also work in humility. I have so much to learn still, and I don't come in with the assumption that I can help everybody, that I can help certain people who I have a fit of service for. And so I try to work through that at the beginning, so that if somebody came in and said they had, for example, an eating disorder, have I worked with people who have eating issues and food issues? Absolutely. Do I specialize in eating disorders? No, I don't. And so I would have that honest conversation to say, I have not done additional training, I have a little bit of experience, but I feel like this is out of my realm of scope of practice, and I feel like the best service for you would be if I could help you, or if you could find someone who specializes in eating disorders, just as an example. This comes up sometimes with addictions, that I have experience working with people with addictions, for example, but I don't specialize necessarily in addictions. Addictions is part of most people's lives, some form of addiction. So absolutely, I have experience and I do have some training, and I'm able to work within some of the scope. But if somebody's coming, for example, for just like mainly to work on an addiction, in that case, I may say that's outside of my scope unless they're able to get additional resources. So could I refer them to a treatment program or an AA program, or in addition, an addictions counselor? Would they be willing to do those pieces so that I can maybe work with them on relationship with their partner, or some family dynamics, or some work stresses, or some trauma? But that addiction and overcoming their addiction may not be the main piece that I work on, as some examples. Those are just a couple of examples. So I try to assess that with people from the beginning, and sometimes it comes up later on. You know, sometimes we'll start doing the work together, and later on they may bring up certain issues. In that case, I may refer them for additional, or we call it like co-current therapies. Right. So if they bring up, say, issues with a partner, and it seems like they may benefit from couple counseling, that I can do the individual piece and may refer them to also do additionally some couples counseling piece around that. So I think that kind of answers the first question, and then the second question more if others are noticing that it's not a right fit, like throughout the therapy, then I think it's having an honest conversation to check in. I try to check in with people during periods of time, like, how are you finding the therapy? Are you finding this helpful for you? Does it feel like a right fit? If I'm sensing that they're not achieving their goals or not moving through the therapy in the way that they're hoping to, I find it very helpful just to do an honest conversation and an honest check-in. And I do always upfront tell people that if at any point they feel like they're not having their needs met, to please feel comfortable to talk to me, and I will help them find someone. That I won't take that personal, that it's about them getting the help that they need. Right. So I think honest conversations is really the answer to both of those questions, being upfront, being honest, allowing that space to tell them they can be honest and upfront as well.
So I've heard this, and I've questioned it on occasion, that somebody will be in counseling for years and basically still struggle. And I don't know personally, and my question is about that, is that a good fit with the counselor if somebody just stays stuck? Maybe it's the person, like if it's somebody who's really unfortunately struggling with like personality disorder or something like that, or is some of it maybe the counseling mode that's been chosen?
I think there's absolutely different ways of looking at that. Ideally, people will want to work through their issues. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months. For some people, it's years. If they have, say, chronic PTSD or complex PTSD, for example, and other mental health issues and a lot of things going on in their life, that's likely going to take a longer therapy. And say they also are dissociative and trying to get on the right medications or the right treatments, or work through a lot of childhood trauma and dysfunction that happened in the family and a lot of different issues throughout their life, is going to be a different amount of time than somebody who had like a fairly decent growing up and relatively like adulthood, but maybe is coming in for like a car accident or some like relationship issues or some work stress. Not that those aren't also very significant and difficult to work through and might take some time as well, but likely a different span of time than the first scenario that I described, where certain people may take and need to take longer. If it's going on, say, 10 years, like you said, and not seeing much change, I think that would be important for the therapist and person coming for support to have those conversations around what are your goals at this point, and is it becoming like a dependency of just being in a comfort zone? And sometimes people will say that. They may say when checking in with their past experiences, well, I saw a therapist for many, many, many years, but they became kind of like a friend, that we would just have coffee together, but I recognized that I need to work through my trauma, and they weren't necessarily comfortable working through trauma. They may have helped with very important parts in their life, but maybe just weren't trained in trauma therapy, for example. So they may come to myself or somebody else for that piece around, like, now I want to go into the deeper level of getting to the roots of my trauma, or really doing that deeper level work, which is the therapy work. So that can happen too, that I believe there's not a wrong thing around if they choose to see a therapist for a long time. I just think it's important to have those conversations to look at, is this helping, or at a certain point, is it enabling a person to be stuck for too long? So it kind of goes back to those honest conversations that I was talking about earlier, having those upfront talks and not pushing people. I'm not a believer in pushing people out of therapy if somebody doesn't feel ready to stop therapy, but certainly to reassess, like, what are your goals? How can I support you? Do you need additional supports? Those kind of things. And I find the most part, most people on their own want to work towards those goals, and once they start feeling better or working through those things, will naturally start spacing out appointments that they go from maybe weekly to bi-weekly to monthly to maybe just checking in maybe once a year, and then feeling like they're okay and could they call back if something comes up, kind of thing. So that, I would say, for the majority of people is the scenario. Yeah, that in my experience.
I was a little surprised when you said about actually working with somebody when they would also be working with another counselor. And that's quite the norm nowadays?
It will depend. So somebody, say that example I gave around the addiction, somebody might be doing like a treatment program or working with an addictions counselor, and then at the same time want to see a marriage therapist to work on the relationship with their partner, or do some trauma work once their addictions is, I guess, at a place where they feel like they can manage working through their trauma, as that example. So there's certain situations where somebody might seek individual counseling and also might want to take a break from individual counseling to do some couple counseling or family counseling or a specific type of counseling, or they might want to do it at the same time, which is a lot of work. Some people will do that, and it's a lot of work. They'll do some individual counseling to work through some of their personal things, and then couple or family counseling to help work on relationships. So it's definitely more work for a person, but it does happen that sometimes therapists, likewise, if a couple therapist is working with a couple, they might notice one or the other partner has a lot of trauma. So they may recommend that it might be helpful for their relationship for one of the partners to seek out trauma therapy. And I've had that happen too, where a couples therapist will refer somebody to me, will reach out and say, I'm in couples counseling and my therapist recommended I see you for some EMDR therapy around some of my childhood trauma. Just as some examples of times when people might do more than one type of therapy at the same time. Logical,
yeah. Different in some ways, because it used to be that if you were doing addiction work, it was kind of like, this is enough work, and don't fragment and try and solve another problem, just stay focused on that. But I can also see the benefit of such a supportive environment if you have a couple of therapists working with you.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. So when you have, obviously, clients, and you'll have some, no doubt, because you're honest, and that you'll have some triggers, or you'll have some of your own stuff. What do you do around that just to keep you healthy and capable of helping others?
Yeah, I love this question too, Deb. I'm such a big advocate of like help for the helpers. So I'm somebody who definitely will always say I walk my talk. I have been going for my own counseling probably since I went to school, which was many years ago. Whenever I've needed counseling, I've been through my own traumas, my own situations in life, and I think that's a human experience. I don't know if any of us as human beings walk this lifetime without some forms of challenges or hardships or possibly traumas, and I think that's part of life. And so both to be a best person that I can be and a healthiest person that I can be as a mom to raising children, and also to be as present as I can for the people that I support in my work. I do that work, and I work hard at it to take care of myself, to be my best self for other people, to be of best service for other people. And that's what I love about things like the invisible wounds and support for like the peer supports, like the boots on the ground, where there's peer supports and people helping each other, because we're not islands. We are not, in private practice and in doing a lot of the calls, first responders, they're either on their own or in a small team of people, but we need each other. you know, I need the first responders in this world, and at some point several of them will need myself or other counselors. It's a symbiosis relationship. We need each other as people, and I think it's doing that self-care is a way that I can recognize that in myself, so that that I'm not getting triggered by stories, that because I do that work, I can sit and hear really hard stories and feel okay. I can be that neutral place where people can come in and hopefully know that they're not burdening, as other therapists do that work too, to be this space where we can be neutral and hear whatever they have to say, as hard as it is. Because if they're starting to share and I'm getting activated, or I'm a first responder, will pick it up like that, I bet, because many first responders are so bright and so attuned to the environment that I've noticed. They just have this incredible skill of, I don't mean to generalize, but it's just something I notice as such an amazing quality, as they can read people like that, like judge a character, judge a situation. They'll pick up on a facial expression, nonverbal, like all of this. So I want to be fully present as a strength and a neutral space where people can share anything, as hard as it is. They've had to live it and experience. The least I can do is listen and help them work through by taking care of myself. So I really appreciate that question, and I'm a strong advocate for other mental health practitioners to do that self-care, for first responders to take care of their body, their mind, and for all people in general to do that work as much as possible.
Well, thank you, because I also think it's extremely important, and I also think that some people don't do it, unfortunately. That's my perception, and it's to their own personal detriment, and also to those that they're counseling. So putting yourself out there and acknowledging you've had your own journey, and that you do reach out on a regular basis for support or treatment, whatever you want to call it, I think that's important for people to hear. Now, Natalie, you've been involved with Invisible Wounds for 8 years now, correct? And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, if you have seen or heard any difference around the community that you live because of your involvement, or with your involvement with Invisible Wounds.
I would say absolutely. When becoming involved 8 years ago, if I would ask some people if they've heard of Invisible Wounds, and would encourage people to look into it if I thought that might be something helpful for them to attend, like a first responder. A lot of times they may or may not have heard of it. Now if I mention it, every single person has heard of it. This is like 8 years later, if I mention, have you ever heard of the Invisible Wounds conferences? Like, every person that I ask now will know about it and have heard good things about it. So I think it's been promoted more, it's more well known. I want to take this opportunity to say, Deb, the amazing work that you do around not just the behind the scenes and organizing it, but present in the community, and your knowledge of people and what the needs are of first responders. It's just amazing, like all the hours, and I don't know if as many people know the amount of work that you put and the amount of hours that you put into that, but I know that, and I just wanted to acknowledge and express gratitude around your commitment to that, and what a difference I see it's making in the community, that people are aware of it, more people are aware of PTSD, of mental health. I know in this area of like Grey Bruce here in Perth area, that many more first responders are reaching out for mental health services, and I contribute in part of that to first Invisible Wounds, as well as more and more staff within the organizations stepping up and taking those roles as mental health advocates. I want to acknowledge those people as well as every single first responder who takes that step to seek out, whether it's through the EFAP, the Employee Assistance Program, or looking into their benefits, or colleagues. Now a lot of times the referrals come from word of mouth through colleagues, and I want to acknowledge that too, that wow, like people are taking the courage to get counseling and mental health support, but they're also encouraging their buddies and their colleagues to also, and people are asking like, hey, I noticed you're feeling better, who did you go see? And then they'll call and say, yeah, my buddy or my colleague referred me to you, they said it was really helpful, or so on, or do you know anybody, and that kind of thing. And I think that roots from invisible wounds in at least some aspects, because it's really brought forth the mental health and the importance of mental health, and people going and hearing other police officers, other firefighters, other paramedics, other military, whether they're nurses, doctors, like those frontline workers speaking up about their journey and their healing journey is totally making a difference in the world of mental health, and people taking that courage to get the support and feel better. So I would say 100%.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to take this opportunity to elaborate a little bit on that, is that we're very fortunate that we have people like you involved, because, as speakers, we've had such, I always say, these people come and they speak and they share their story, and the conferences morph every year with what's kind of going on. It used to be in the province, now it's in Canada, and they share. I mean, it's gut honesty, and it's the struggles, and it's how they're hanging on sometimes by a thread, but how they have supports out there, and like you said, boots on the ground, and Wounded Warriors is another one. Dalton has programs out there. There's a lot of resources out there that are becoming more visible, and there's more noise about it, which is just wonderful. Yeah, and it's nice to be part of an organization that is making changes. I know, even though we're small and we're not big by any means, that we are saving lives. And when I say we, it's because of people like you and other speakers that come out, and our sponsors that support us. So thank you for mentioning that and letting us talk about it for a minute.
You're welcome. And 8 years ago, when I did a small presentation about EMDR therapy in the Invisible Wounds conference in Kincardine, 6 years after that, when there was the conference in Walkerton, I think it was around 6 years after, a number of years after anyways, I had a police officer come to me and say, I heard you speak at the conference in Kincardine, Invisible Wounds conference in Kincardine, and because you mentioned a certain therapist who provides in the area that we live, at least myself and 12 colleagues have gone for EMDR therapy. And I think about the ripple effect, if that's like including them 13 people, and then if each person, whether it's for EMDR therapy or some form of mental health support, and that's how it works. It's one person tells one person tells one person, and it just has that ripple effect in a really positive way. And so that's an example of one person and that ripple effect. And then when you multiply it by the number of attendees and how that can have a positive ripple effect, then it's quite big.
And the other thing that we've had, just to let you know this, is that, 2018, when there was so many OPP that died, we had anger, we had grief, we had sanctuary trauma, and it was so loud and vocal that it was a real heads up for me that, wow, this is like a fire keg and it needs to be addressed. And I made phone calls saying, you really need to do something internally around this. I don't know whether those calls and made actions or not, but at least it was spreading the awareness, and there was some follow-up. There's always follow-ups after a conference. Yeah, and actually the fact that now we're gradually starting to involve families is also something that's a bit of a change too. So yeah, there's a ripple effect going on in all different ways. So
yes,
thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, thanks, Deb.
I'm going to ask you a personal question. You weren't prepped for this one, but I notice, and I know you, so it's not that I notice, you're deeply committed to the Indigenous population. Would you like to comment on that in any way? And you don't have to.
Yeah, no, that is totally fine, and I absolutely can answer that question because it is something I'm very committed to and passionate about, both that I'm a mother of Indigenous children through their father's side. I'm not Indigenous, but both that I want to be the best mother possible to raise children who are Indigenous, but also just learning more and more the history and present situations of Indigenous people. I feel it's a responsibility, it's a commitment, it's part of reconciliation to make this choice every day, to learn more every day. It's something I think about every single day, in many times of the day, ways that I can learn more or support or do something in whatever small or big way, like in the community or in my own personal life or in my work. So I do work with quite a number of clientele who are Indigenous, including first responders. I've had a number of first responders who are Indigenous as well. So I feel, it's a passion to want to help people, and it's a passion to also want to help Indigenous people. There's a lot I could say about it, but I'll just say that.
You probably know that my experience is that way back when I was so honored to be asked to work on a reserve, and they taught me so much, and the whole spiritual aspect of the culture was just, it's never left me. So. That's why I kind of wanted to touch on that. And also the fact that you are a great mom, and I know that, and you've raised 2 wonderful sons, and I've seen them. I mean, I see your one son playing the bagpipes in a ceremony surrounded by his family and his community up on, I don't know where it is, just up where there's no trees. Where is that?
In Nunavik.
In Nunavik, yes. So, great kids.
Yeah,
great
thank
mom.
you, Deb. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Natalie, I'd like to thank you for coming here and for sharing your honesty, your integrity, information about your practice. You know that I respect you and love you.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor, and I just want to take a moment to thank you personally, and also to thank all the first responders out there, and thank each person for their service, and please do take care of yourself. Selves.
Welcome. To begin, sit comfortably in a chair or lie on the floor. Place one hand on your stomach and the other hand on your chest. Gently close your eyes and bring your awareness to your breath. Take note of the pattern of movement of your 2 hands. As you breathe in and breathe out, does one hand move more than the other? Now take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Exhale fully through your mouth so that you feel your lower hand moving inwards. Relax your shoulders. Loosen your jaw. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Continue to breathe in deeply and exhale fully focusing on your breath. As you inhale, focus on moving your hand outwards on your stomach. As you exhale, focus on moving your hand inwards on your stomach. Feel your lower back pressing into the back of your chair or towards the floor. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Take one last inhale in and exhale. Notice how you feel. Thank yourself for taking time out of your day to practice self-care.
The reason why it's so important to be aware of PTSD, first and foremost, because it's more prevalent than people realize. People's trauma and distress, like you can think of them as like invisible injuries. And just because you can't see it right away doesn't mean it isn't affecting people negatively. If people have been hurt in their history and that hasn't been healed, it hasn't been able to be resolved, especially if it hasn't been able to be healed or resolved, it affects their present day too. So everything gets harder. So someone who seems to be really struggling and you can't understand why, it's often because they've had a history that's been pretty challenging. We often tend to ascribe lots of meaning to an individual and much less to their context, and the context really does matter. And so being more aware of the prevalence of PTSD and trauma and the role of distress in people's lives can help us both have a more fair view of the people around us, a more compassionate view of people around us, but also of ourselves. Very rarely does a human go through life unscathed by challenging situations. And so even if not complete PTSD, just being mindful of the impact of stressful situations is helpful. And being especially mindful of people who've gone through situations distressing enough to lead to a break in trust with themselves, with others in the world, which is one of the key components of PTSD. It's not a symptom. It shows up in really harsh beliefs about self, others, in the world. But the underlying thing is a breach in trust in relationship to self, others, in the world.
For help, because so long in my service, over 40 years at that time, we were always giving help to other people and listening to their problems and solving their problems. And of course, coming from a culture of push on and put your head down and continue was not conducive to telling your own story. So once I was able to get through that and tell my story, it became much easier. But for many first responders, and particularly myself, that was the hardest thing, just asking for help, because we've always been told we can push through. For me, it was not understanding the process completely. It was a lot of unknowns, and the fear of the unknowns, particularly with me and other first responders, is pretty significant. And one of the things that I noticed that the setting and everything at Ravensview was there to calm us down and to get to the root of the problems that we faced. Understanding my PTSD, that was one of my biggest challenges. And it came to me quite suddenly when I was in treatment my first week. We were asked to rewrite a traumatic episode in our lives. And I had served in the former Yugoslavia as a UN peacekeeper, as a member of the RCMP. And on the 21st of November, 1994, we were ordered to be evacuated from the town that we were stationed in. And I didn't know it at the time, but that had a profound effect on me, because the people in the town thought that the armed forces were coming in and going to kill them. And I'd always thought that PTSD came from an incident that actually occurred to one. And many years later, I found out that that incident, having to leave those people in fear for their lives, really had a dramatic impact on me. So much so that when I wrote about it in Ravensview, my fourth day into treatment, I had a flashback. I was right back in that Croatian village with those people crying and screaming and wanting help. So it came to me quite quickly and quite profoundly, but I'm glad it did. I can't answer for other first responders. I can answer for myself. First of all, we come from a culture of do it and help people even when there's danger. So when it's time for us to ask for help, it's very, very difficult to do. And the other thing is that we don't want to relive some of those memories. I know for myself, having to relive them was almost as bad as actually living through them the first time. I was successful in putting them away in my mind, and having to bring them out in the open was really difficult for me. But I was really fortunate that I had an excellent group of physicians, psychiatrists, and therapists to help me through that. And Ravensview provided me that ability to get down into what my issues were, particularly around PTSD. Started right away when I turned off the road and wound my way up to the top of the hill where Ravensview was situated. I actually stopped at the sign at the bottom at the road and wondered if I really truly needed this. I had a couple of minutes of reflection, and then I was determined to continue. So what's special about it? It's in its own place. It's at the top of a hill surrounded by a forest, and to the north is Victoria Airport and a very scenic Gulf Islands. So I'd say the setting is really, really important, and it sure helped me. The other thing is too that the campus, as I'd call it, of Ravensview is more like a university setting than a hospital. We're treated like adults, and we're given lots of opportunity to discuss and go over some of the things that brought us to Ravensview. It's a very welcoming environment, and which includes all the staff, not only the medical staff, but also the cleaning staff and also the therapy staff. They are welcoming, and they are aware of some of the things that we've gone through and can help us with it.
Invisible Wounds will host events promoting mental wellness to first responders, their families, and civilians. To find out more, please visit our website at invisible-wounds.ca.